Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Round Robin. Today with me is Christina Mulligan, Nina Mulligan, and my husband, Todd Preston. But we're still missing Regina. So last week she was on PTO, and this week she's dealing with the hurricane in Texas. So our hearts go out to Regina because that sucks, generator or not.
Hey, everybody. Hey.
Hey, guys.
This is season 2, episode 17. And on this round robin, we are going to be, well, we kind of ran out of shows. We did all the shows. And the reason why we kind of ran out of shows to talk about is because we had a 3-parter and a 2-parter. I think those were the only ones, right, Christine?
Yeah, but we are going to kind of tie it back to the brothers.
The brothers.
Yeah, so we're still going to kind of talk about one of our podcasts, but we're just kind of jumping off of that one a little bit to talk about an overarching kind of mental health, the nature versus nurture part of the mind and how we cope with things and deal with things. The reason that I kind of was thinking about this, and Tracy and I were talking about this, was that new show on HBO Max. Do you have more details about that, Trace?
Yeah, it was super great. So we've been seeing it also. It's called Six Schizophrenic Brothers. And it's an Irish Catholic family. So there's 12 kids, all boys, and at the end, 2 little girls. 6 out of the 12 kids, the boys, were schizophrenic. And it was mind-blowing.
I like how you say schizophrenic.
Am I saying it wrong? Am I saying it?
No, it's fine. It's accents. It's all about accents, my love. Listen, I really got into that show. And of course, you know, for the listeners that are already getting to know me, they know I super geeked out about the genome that they looked into and the connection to the genome that all of the boys, right, Trace? All of the boys had it, but only 6 of them showed up with schizophrenia, right?
All the boys who had schizophrenia had this Cherna7 gene. All of them had it. So they were studying, you know, people with schizophrenia, but then they want to say, oh, is there a gene link? And then, of course, they're like, oh, well, there's the Galvin family out in Colorado Springs.
In Colorado Springs. So this family was the Galvin family, and it's an HBO Max show called The Six Schizophrenic Brothers. It's a 4-episode miniseries, docu-series kind of thing. It's interesting. Go watch it if you have any interest in this at all. If you're listening to us, you probably do. It's a pretty good show. I geeked out a little bit about the genome, but they really don't touch on it as much as I wish that they would have. But they did kind of tell the backstory. Like, they really went deep into the family's backstory. And the thing is that they had this gene, but what triggered it and the time frame in which it kind of triggered. And most of them kind of got triggered in their early 20s. But there was one of the boys that kind of went off the rails in his teens, right? There was one of them that ended up supposedly committing suicide, right?
Correct. Right. He killed his girlfriend because that was a part of his disease, right?
Right. But we don't know that much about him. He wasn't technically diagnosed, was he?
Yes.
Oh, he was?
Yes,
Oh,
all of these boys, yeah, because it just came one after the other, right? So started out with their oldest son, right, firstborn, and, I mean, always happy and this and that, but schizophrenia comes on, and I think I know what you're talking about now, because you say phrenic, and I say phrenic.
Yeah, schizophrenic.
It's Frankenstein.
Froderick. Okay. Anyway, but what I liked about it is it gives you the whole story of, you know, all the kids being born and who came this and where they moved and the sports they played and this and that. And the one thing that I was telling Todd about, because I was listening to it as I was working today. Do we want to go into the trauma part yet? I mean, we don't want to tell them everything, but I don't know.
The thing is that they have this gene. The boys were coming of an age where something traumatic happens to them. And then after that traumatic event is when they started showing a lot of symptomology of schizophrenia. The thing is that there were a few that they weren't sure what their traumatic event was, or at first, upon onset of the symptomology of schizophrenia, for a few of them, they didn't think they had a traumatic event. Like you said, some of them were into sports. A few of the boys were very into music. They were all pretty popular at school. They didn't have, any bully issues. They didn't have any social angst that was readily palpable. They were all kind of age appropriate. And by the way, this is set in the 60s and early 70s, at least this storyline, like when all of them started being diagnosed and recognized. So mental health and asylums were still.
They were very scary because it was lock you up, and it's lock you up for a long time.
Right. And it was lock you up and do things like lobotomies, where they go in and they basically just break up your frontal lobe. They just kind of stab at it, and they thought that was healing in some way. What it did was it made you kind of into a zombie. It calmed you down, is what they said it did. But what it actually did was zombify you.
And the reason that you're zombified, just so it helps people understand, right? All the things that your frontal lobe does. Emotions, your critical thinking, your muscle movements, understanding right and wrong, memories. They're cutting away the fibers that connect that to the rest of the brain.
Right. They
it's
basically
crazy.
just went in there and chopped around with a skinny scalpel.
Yeah, they go back and forth. That's done.
They were just breaking it up in there, loosening things up to loosen you up.
Yeah, but don't forget, Christine, it didn't come out for years, and it's like any trauma, because that's the trigger for this gene. You had the gene, but it's kind of like what we talked about with, did I bring this up about Coster?
No.
No, the Rains brothers. We brought it up about them. Child abuse or child trauma in any way, shape, or form, whether you're being physically hit or whether you witness something that is very traumatic to you.
Right.
Very traumatic.
We talked about that when we talked about the Rains brothers.
We did. The mom.
Nature. We talked about how when he was 15 and 16, when he was doing his crime, how he didn't know much better. You know what I mean? Was he schizophrenic? Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. He went on to be a paralegal and all of that. But we don't know what really happened along the way. So was he schizophrenic, or was he didn't know better? So you only do the best you can with the knowledge that you have.
Right.
Was that the case for him, or was he a schizophrenic?
He could be, but remember, symptoms of schizophrenia do not come out until the ages of 16 to 30. It affects more men, more boys than women. So the trauma happens when they're young, is what it sounded like, especially with these boys. It definitely happened because they were altar boys, right? I don't want to give everything away, but all those boys were molested by that father.
Not all of them.
The younger one had head trauma because the other one was acting out, and I think he punched him so hard he flew through the air, and when he landed, he actually fractured this kid's skull. He's bleeding all over the place. So he had head trauma. And they think that that's what brought. Plus, he's watching his older brothers, because remember, you've got 12 kids in a household, so you can be a little toddler watching your oldest brother try to choke your mom and throw furniture and remove furniture, bust through windows. That's what these little kids were watching too.
That is interesting. Ode to the nature of it, the nurture of it all, right? Because nature, they had the gene. The nurture of it all is the younger ones. I forget their numbers, but in the show, in the docu-series, it kind of gives them all numbers so you can keep track of their diagnoses and their stories and their timelines individually and collectively by utilizing a number system for the 12 children. So they speak a lot about this one's name and then this number.
Correct.
This name and this number.
Yeah.
So that's kind of throughout the docuseries. But what is interesting is that the later numbered boys, the younger boys, they did kind of go off the rails at a younger age than the older ones did. Because the first one, it wasn't until he was 24. The second one, he was I think he was 24 as well. And then it went on from there, and they got younger from there.
Family trauma, though.
Yeah.
You got the gene, and you had the trauma because you had some crazy shit going on. And there's also another, so there was on the show a Dr. Lynn DeLisi. She's a physician and a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical. And she also talked about the Shank 2, like the number 2 gene. So they're finding more and more the more they study it, which I'm happy. I'm so happy that they're really studying it because it doesn't have to be bad. I read a lot tonight before getting ready for the show, and I watched a really cool video that this girl did who has schizophrenia, and it was really cool to watch it. She's seeing things like things are fractured and then they're back in place. It showed her sitting there, but it also showed her in her right ear yelling, kind of nagging at her in the negative voice. And then she said, so I hear that, and then over on my left ear, I'm hearing the good one. Everything's cool, this and that. And it's nonstop. Nonstop. I mean, how awful must that be for people?
Past round robins, I've always said, like, sometimes you find yourself being like, am I the problem? Well, when I was watching this show and they were talking about that, like the inside voices and the things that you hear and all of that, well, I myself have a very loud head. I am always hearing inner monologue.
Right.
Here we go. Here's my crazy button. I am one of those people where I feel like I hear other people's voices telling me stuff as well. I had myself thinking, oh my God, am I schizophrenic?
Oh my God. Okay, so anyway, I actually have 2 schizophrenics that I've known in my life, but one is my brother, happens to be related to me. Backstory is there was my mom and my dad, and they had me. And then they got divorced, and my dad remarried, and my mom remarried. So I am the only product of the original marriage, although there's 2 brothers and a sister from them. On my father and my stepmom's side is my brother and my sister, okay? They're both like about a year apart, but they're 9 and 8 years younger than me. They grew up in the same household and experienced the same things that I did, except that I only had to go there, every other weekend. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I was older. By the time I got to be like in middle school and high school, that became less and less and less. So I didn't spend as much time over there. As a kid, I did witness my parents be violent towards each other when I would be over there for summer vacation and things of that nature. And I did not like going over there because they were so volatile with each other. And they were volatile with each other while holding my sibling. They were young at that point and probably wouldn't remember any of that. But I do remember, my brother, he wet the bed for a very long time, well beyond the age that you should. He also was a very heavy sleepwalker to the point where he would go across the street, wake up the neighbors, and ask to use their bathroom at like 3:00 in the morning. I think as time went on, my brother then discovered drugs, and I think 19 was around when it kicked in, and when he was diagnosed. And so from that point on, it has become progressively worse. And there are different types of schizophrenia as well.
Mm-hmm.
He is a paranoid schizophrenic, but he also has the subcontext of the religious kind. So he speaks as if the Bible is speaking to him. He is grandiose in his thinking. He used to carry a picture of Jennifer Aniston in his wallet and tell people that was his fiance and that they were getting married. He cannot hold down a job. He lives with my parents because he is pretty much disabled. He takes medicine, but that medicine makes him subdued, but also all he does all day long is eat and chain smoke. He doesn't take a shower. He doesn't wipe himself. It's just my parents, they actually sleep with a lock on the inside of their door because he's, threatened to kill my dad because my dad is the devil, according to the Bible. So there is for the people who have to take care of the adults, it's getting to the point where my parents are, in their late 60s. They've been doing this since he was 19. He's 30 something now. I can't do math, but I'm 44 and he's 9 years younger than me. So, he's in his 30s. They can't continue to do this, but he has nowhere else to go. And I often wonder, what's going to happen? Because there is no state hospital that will take him because they're full up. He has gone there before because he was arrested for assaulting my dad. They put him on medication for 2 days, and as long as he's not a threat to himself, they send him home.
We're not going to say nothing about they're all full up. They're full up.
There's no vacancy. I think to myself, I worry for my parents, as they worry for their own lives every evening with the door locked. What is he going to do when they're gone?
I don't know. That's frightening.
He has no concept of reality at all.
So let me ask you this. So when he's home, maybe you don't know, I don't know if you know, but is he stop taking his meds? Because that's the biggest problem. They take the meds, they feel good, they stop, and then they lose it again.
Yes, we've been through several cycles of that. Mm-hmm. So, and my dad has to stay on top of him and fight him every day about it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is the things that he's on doesn't make him functional. It just makes him not violent.
Maybe he's on, because that's one of the things I learned in that video that I watched of that girl. So this was her recommendation. First, you have to have a good doctor, 1. 2, there's a lot of different meds. There's a lot of different meds out there. If this isn't working, like I'm a zombie or this or that, this might be the wrong med. And then the other thing is talking, therapy.
Yeah, he doesn't do any of that. He does not interact with people. It was 2 years ago. He kind of remembered who I was. He understood who I was. He didn't act in a way that a brother would after not seeing you for a long time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like a person who's had amnesia and you told them, hey, this is your sister. Oh, hey, how's it going? You know what I mean? He doesn't wipe himself. When he goes to the bathroom.
I'm sorry.
And I'm not saying every single person is like this. Of any other mental disorder, there's a spectrum. You know what I'm saying? But he's past the point of anything working. So when there's nobody forcing him to take these medicines anymore, then my brother's going to be a homeless schizophrenic. He's going to hurt somebody, or he's going to hurt himself, or he's going to do both at the same time. You know what I mean? So it's a
tough situation.
It's a tough situation.
Mm-hmm. But for the conversation,
it's textbook though. Right? That's textbook.
It can be textbook, but there's obviously a spectrum. I mean, thankfully, this young lady that you watched a video on her, she's doing okay, and she's managing, and she's functioning in the world.
Yeah, and she lives in New York City. So it's really cool because it just took you from, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the YouTube link for her video. I think it was 2017. But it took you from the moment the alarm clock goes off. As soon as, that happens, you have a voice telling you, don't get up, you're no good, blah, blah, blah. And then you have another one. It's okay, get up, come on, you can do it. Can you imagine that nonstop? So it takes you from the very beginning of her day. She's even designed a clothesline to, for awareness. And then, of course, she donates proceeds to help because she had seen a homeless person, talking in tongues, this, that, and the other thing. And she made a comment about looking at him, and then she's like, what makes me different from that person? It's meds. And so it's really cool. That's why she designed this clothesline, and then she gives back to the community to help these people.
I wonder what the ratio of, between men and women, who is more of a high-functioning schizophrenic? Are there, if you're a woman, are you more likely to be treatable than is it more likely when you're a man that you end up kind of like my brother?
This is the statistics for the entire world population. About 0.3% to 0.7% of people in the entire population of the world are diagnosed with schizophrenia in their lifetime. That's still a huge amount of people.
It's a ton.
Yeah, but it's hard. That makes me feel better because the more we talk about it and the subtle signs and symptoms and the fact that there's a spectrum, I'm now very concerned I'm a schizophrenic.
Chances are real good.
Well,
we're going to keep an eye on you.
Might be there.
But you're older than 30.
That's ADHD. Maybe ADHD is the most simplistic form of schizophrenia.
You know what, Nina, you're absolutely right.
Why not? That makes sense.
You're absolutely, no, she's totally right.
ADHD people, they don't, they can't concentrate. They start things and stop things. They're very passionate, but then.
Well, I can concentrate, but when I concentrate, it's hella concentrating.
Right.
It's you can scream in my ear, but if I'm concentrating on something, I don't hear you. But then it swings the other way. And yes, there is a pendulum and there is a spectrum, and every day is a little bit different from the last. But there's a lot of talk about schizophrenia happening in my life. I watched the show. Now we're having this conversation. And all of a sudden I'm realizing that's a little bit paranoid.
You're the paranoid type. You're the paranoid type. I have an article. I kind of want to read a little bit from the Mayo Clinic regarding schizophrenia, because not a lot of people understand. More conversations we have about it, the more people will remove the stigma, the more people will seek treatment, because it's totally treatable. It's totally treatable. Got to get it in the beginning. You got to watch for signs. Get help right away. So that's one of the things that happened in the show. Oh, we'll just keep him home because it was a stigma. It was a very wealthy family, this Galvin family.
You said it was a stigma for them. And yes, I agree with that. To some extent, they were worried about the stigma because they were an affluent family. But on the other hand, you got to remember what asylums were like, what the mental institutions were like back in that time. I mean, asylums were not nice places.
Agreed.
Not very many people went in that they eventually came out. A lot of them went in and never came out.
True.
So as a parent, I don't know at that time, I don't think I'd send my kid to one either.
Right, but it's also, granted, it wasn't as bad as it used to be, but it was in the late 60s. So I'm not saying the treatment was great. It wasn't as bad as it was, but agreed. Bad, bad, bad. And they also didn't want him there. And that woman, I wish I could stop talking about the show, but it was so good. Their mother handled all this stuff. All these boys. It was like, boom, one. Oh, now this one. Oh, now that one. I don't even know how she did. I don't know how she did it.
I don't know how she did it either. And it was very offensive. Mm-hmm. There was a point where they started to, the mental health community at large, because this was a topic going on at that same time. And it was being talked about on radio and TV shows. They touch on that in the docu-series, but they don't go too in-depth in it. But knowing what I know about that time, they were, it was like the flip side of Freud. Like everything was the mom's fault. Like everything was the fault of the parents. If you had a mental problem at all, it was your parents' fault. They traumatized you. They were too firm. They were too rigid. They were too religious, whatever the case may be. And I feel like that was really offensive, only because, first of all, you didn't walk a mile in those shoes before you started diagnosing all of this and spewing all of this. And number two is any human, especially every mother out there, no matter what time they are a mother, they only do the best they can with what they know. And what they know is molded by society. So to have society come clap back at you while you're trying to do, quote, the right thing, and they tell you you're doing it all wrong, that's offensive on on a woman level, on a mom level, on a human level. Like, that's just offensive.
Agreed.
Yeah. Too soapboxy? No, I love it.
I can't hear you, Nina.
That's because she muted me.
Oh.
She must have known I was going to be like, yeah, I want to be like a big fuck you. Society, okay? Get off of me. I'm doing the best I can with what I got.
Amen. All right, so I'm going to read some of this article here from the Mayo Clinic. It's titled Schizophrenia. Did I say that wrong again?
Yes.
Schizophrenia.
You said it right the first time, Froderick.
We have to educate, so that's what we're going to do. So schizophrenia, that's just how I say it. Schizophrenia is a serious mental health condition that affects how people think, feel, and behave. It may result in a mix of hallucinations, delusions, and disorganized thinking and behavior. Hallucinations involve seeing things or hearing voices that aren't observed by others. Delusions involve firm beliefs about things that are not true. People with schizophrenia can seem to lose touch with reality, which makes daily living very hard. Everything we've already talked about. It does say people with schizophrenia need lifelong treatment. This includes medicine, talk therapy, and help in learning how to manage daily life's activities. So again, we have the delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech and thinking, extremely disorganized or unusual motor behavior, negative symptoms, right? That negative talk. People with schizophrenia usually are diagnosed in the late teen years to the early 30s. In men, schizophrenia symptoms usually start in the late teens to early 20s. So we definitely saw that in that show we watched. In women, symptoms usually begin in the late 20s to early 30s. There's also a group of people, usually women, who are diagnosed later in life. It isn't common for children to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Like, this is symptoms for teenagers, so something to look out for. Schizophrenia symptoms in teenagers are like those in adults, but the condition may be harder to pinpoint. That's because some early symptoms of schizophrenia, those that occur before hallucinations, delusions, and disorganization, are commonly seen in many teens. As I was laughing because I'm like, oh, this is a hard one. How do you know? So we have withdrawing from friends and family, not doing well in school, having trouble sleeping, feeling irritable or depressed, and lacking motivation. Also, the use of recreational drugs such as marijuana, stimulants like cocaine, and methamphetamines or hallucinogens can cause similar symptoms. So compared with adults with schizophrenia, teens with the condition may be less likely to have delusions and more likely to have hallucinations. That's interesting, right? If you feel something, go to the doctor, because that's the thing I saw in a lot of the videos I was watching. Well, they know something's wrong. Hopefully there's an open line of communication. Like, listen to your kids in their teenage years, right? Really listen to them.
I do want to talk about the whole nurture aspect, that teenagers, especially male teenagers, like this should be also something that's spoken about when we talk about drugs. You know, we're teaching the kids not to do drugs and all of that. I mean, I know we don't have the DARE campaign anymore. That's dating myself a bit. But I know that all teenagers hear about drugs. You know what I mean? And I think one thing that they definitely don't hear is the fact that it is Russian roulette. I mean, if you take one drug too many or you take the wrong drug for your system, which you will not know until it's too late.
Yeah, until it already happens. Now you're never the same.
Rewind your brain the wrong way.
Yep.
Like, legit, that is a 100% accuracy.
Yep.
That when you do drugs, mind-altering drugs, they do rewire your brain. So it is Russian roulette. Especially if you have this gene that was pointed out in the show and you talked about a little bit earlier. Maybe we should be testing kids for this gene to keep them even further away from drugs to the best of our ability, of course. Of course, that's...
Yeah, but that takes us back to the conversation we had about the monoamine enzyme. And Regina said, no. You're not going to get people to let you draw their blood.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a gray line. It's like, what do we call preventative medicine and what do we call intrusive medicine? Like, it's a fine line.
Preventative or preemptive? I think that's what most people would be concerned with. The preemptiveness and where that line gets crossed. And then only accepting perfect specimen.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope.
I
agree with that. That's a slippery slope.
Because we don't want schizophrenia. And I feel there's an answer to all of our ailments that we have in our brain. But for whatever reason, it has to exist right now. So we need to figure out what that is for so that we can reverse it. So that we can eliminate that from our systems. And Christine and I have talked about this all the time. Because her big thing is she believes that we have the capability of really being able to heal our own selves. We just don't understand our own minds and the frequency of which to do that.
On Nina's point, key to that would not have forced help, but making help available, because right now it's not even available.
Well, guess what, that goes back to the conversation we had about having mental health in schools. We've right?
Right.
So if we had that, here's another reason why we need that. I want to get back to the article because I want to talk about some risk factors and complications because I think it's important. And if we're learning about it, let's learn about it. A family history of schizophrenia, life experiences such as living in poverty, stress, and danger. Some pregnancy and birth issues such as not getting enough nutrition before or after birth, low weight, or exposure to toxins or viruses before birth that may affect brain development. taking mind-altering, also called psychoactive or psychotropic drugs as a teen or young adult, which is what Christine was just talking about. And then some complications, suicide, suicidal thoughts, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, also known as OCD, check, depression, misuse of alcohol or other drugs, including nicotine, not being able to work or attend school, money problems and homelessness, social isolation, health and medical problems, being victimized, and aggressive or violent behavior, though people with schizophrenia are more likely to be assaulted rather than to assault others, which I find that one interesting.
There's a few more risk factors on this list that I saw that some of them I just was really shocked to hear, but birth in late winter or early spring. I don't know how that would affect, but
vitamin deficiency, maybe.
Having an older father, being born and raised in a large city, which that makes sense. I mean, if you're born and raised into a hectic lifestyle, everything else was already touched on. I mean, that was just some added things that I'd noticed. And I think the thing that I thought was the strangest was being born in late winter or early spring.
I was born in late winter. Uh-oh.
And I have OCD on some things.
Here's another connection possibly to Catherine Wood's complications from schizophrenia, harm to self or others. Well, she was constantly hurting herself, wasn't she?
That's not Catherine. That's Gwen.
Gwendolyn was doing that?
Gwendolyn was self-harming.
Okay. But maybe there's a connection there, too.
She could have had, because there's very high-functioning schizophreniacs, just like any other mental issue. There's very high-level functioning and very low.
Although I do geek out on some diagnoses and the signs and symptomologies of said diagnoses, at the same time, I'm very acutely aware that many of these signs and symptoms belong to multiple diagnoses. And many of these signs to look for, or foreshadowing or forewarning, also hit multiple diagnoses.
Well, here's quite a list of differential diagnoses associated with schizophrenia. Substance use disorder, Huntington's disease, mood disorders, bipolar disorder, major depression disorder, autism, borderline personality disorder. I mean, there's a lot of other disorders associated all within this one disorder.
Right.
It's crazy. Depression, anxiety, disruptive mood disorder, sleep paralysis.
We all fit some of those facets. And the beautiful thing about these diagnoses, and the beautiful thing about more people learning about them, especially things like autism, depression, anxiety, we're making such headway just in the communication of all of these diagnoses.
It goes back to being a village. I think people are starting to understand that the further that we've thrown ourselves into our screen, the less we have really been interconnected into what is going on in our actual communities. And now we're starting to realize what that is. So now we got to get back to getting out there and meeting people so that we can stop being afraid of one another and know that we all are here because we want people like us. I think people like us, we get together and agree on most things. And the things that we couldn't agree on, we're going to, let it be. Why can't we just all be like that?
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's move that way. Why not?
Be better.
Be better.
Yeah.
Be better.
I'm going to wrap up the show with some important information and phone numbers because I'm super happy about this call, guys, because I think it's important. We want to raise awareness because these people, schizophrenics, can hurt themselves totally. They can absolutely kill other people. We're not saying they don't. But suicidal thoughts and attempts are much higher than the average person without schizophrenia. And if a person is in danger of suicide or has made a suicide attempt, make sure that someone always stays with that person and get them some help. So there's a couple contact numbers here. There's a contact suicide hotline. So in the United States, you can call or text 988. And that is Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's easy, 988, right? It's an emergency. Instead of 911, it's 988. And then the crisis line, there's a number that has Spanish as well. And it's 888-928-9228. 9454, and that's toll free. So again, for a Spanish lifeline, it's 1-888-628-9454. Also, just want to remind everybody that Christine and I are nurses. We have studied a lot of different areas of nursing, but we're not doctors. From our perspectives as nurses and caring about our fellow humans, we want to help spread the word. Everybody don't have to be a doctor to just speak the truth. Educate one another, protect one another, advocate for one another.
Good talk.
It was a good talk. All right, guys.
All right.
All right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Round Robin. Come back on next Malice Monday. Enjoy your week, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.